Resolution versus screen size. A 4K television and a 4K phone have the exact same resolution, 3,840 by 2,160 pixels. Same number, every time. But one is a 65-inch panel sitting across your living room, and the other fits in your pocket. So the obvious question is, do they look the same? Not even close. And the reason has nothing to do with the resolution number itself. Resolution tells you how many pixels exist on a display. That is it. It says nothing about how big each pixel is, how dense they are packed together, or how sharp the image actually looks to your eyes. It is just a count, a grid, width times height. Screen size, on the other hand, tells you the physical area those pixels have to cover. Take that same 3,840 by 2,160 grid and stretch it across a 65-inch TV, and each pixel becomes relatively large. Now take that same grid and squeeze it onto a 6.7-inch phone, and each pixel becomes tiny, almost invisible. That is the real difference. When companies advertise a display as 4K, they are technically correct. The resolution is the same regardless of screen size, but your actual experience of sharpness depends on how tightly those pixels are packed into the physical space. A bigger screen with the same resolution means bigger pixels, and bigger pixels are easier to see, which makes the image look less sharp up close. Smaller screen, same pixel count, tighter packing, sharper image. So if someone tells you two screens are both 4K and therefore look the same, that is a lie by omission. The number alone tells you almost nothing about visual quality. 4K on small screens. This leads directly into one of the most common resolution lies in consumer electronics. Manufacturers love putting 4K panels into small devices, phones, tablets, even laptops under 15 inches, and charging a premium for it. The pitch is simple. More pixels equals better. But on a small screen, 4K is often solving a problem that does not exist. Here is why. On a 6-inch phone, a standard 1080p display already packs around 367 pixels into every inch of screen. That is dense enough that most human eyes cannot distinguish individual pixels at a normal holding distance of about 10 to 12 inches. Bump that phone up to 4K, and you are now cramming over 700 pixels per inch into that same space. Impressive on a spec sheet, completely invisible to your eyeballs in real life. Your eyes literally cannot resolve that level of detail at that distance. You are paying for pixels you will never see. Now, there is a legitimate exception: virtual reality. In a headset, the lenses magnify the display and your eyes sit extremely close, sometimes just a couple of inches away. In that scenario, higher pixel density genuinely reduces the visible grid pattern known as the screen door effect. That is one case where cramming extra pixels into a small panel actually matters. But for a phone sitting in your hand, the difference between 1080p and 4K is essentially invisible, and the trade-off is real. A 4K display on a small device demands more processing power, drains the battery faster, and forces the graphics chip to work harder for zero visible payoff. You are literally burning battery life to render pixels your biology cannot detect. That is not an upgrade. That is marketing. Retina displays. In 2010, Steve Jobs stood on stage and introduced something called the Retina display. His claim was bold. He said the iPhone 4 had so many pixels packed into its screen that the human eye could no longer distinguish individual ones at a typical viewing distance. The magic number he cited was roughly 300 pixels per inch at a distance of 10 to 12 inches from your face. And to be fair, for most people, he was not wrong. But here's what Apple quietly never mentions. Retina is not a technical standard. It is a marketing term. There is no fixed pixels per inch value that qualifies a screen as Retina. Apple simply decides which of its displays earn that label, and the threshold changes depending on the product. The iPhone has over 460 pixels per inch. The MacBook Pro sits at around 227. The older iMac came in at roughly 218. Those are wildly different densities, yet Apple calls all of them Retina. The trick is the viewing distance variable. You hold a phone close to your face, so it needs a higher density. A laptop sits further away, so it can get away with fewer pixels per inch. A desktop monitor sits even further back, so even less is needed. The label stays the same, but the actual sharpness standard keeps shifting. It is also worth noting that the original 300 pixels per inch claim was based on someone with roughly 20/20 vision. About 35% of people actually have better than 20/20 vision, meaning they can absolutely detect pixels on a display Apple calls Retina. So the term is useful as a general concept, the idea that pixels should become invisible, but treating it as some kind of scientific benchmark is exactly what Apple wants you to do, and it is not one. PPI versus resolution. These two terms get used interchangeably all the time, and they should not be, because they measure completely different things. Resolution is the total pixel count on a display, expressed as width times height. height. So 1920 by 1080 means there are roughly 2 million pixels on that screen. 3840 by 2160 means there are about 8.3 million. It is just a raw number. It tells you how many pixels exist, nothing more. Pixels per inch, on the other hand, tells you how tightly those pixels are packed together on the physical screen. It factors in both the resolution and the screen size. And that combination is what actually determines how sharp the image looks to your eyes. Two displays can have the exact same resolution, but completely different pixels per inch values. A 24-inch monitor at 1920 by 1080 has about 92 pixels per inch. A 15-inch laptop with the same 1920 by 1080 resolution has around 147 pixels per inch. Same resolution, same pixel count, but the laptop looks noticeably sharper because its pixels are smaller and closer together. This is why resolution alone is a terrible way to judge display quality. A 27-inch 4K monitor has about 163 pixels per inch. A 32-inch 4K monitor drops to around 140. Both are 4K. Both have 8.3 million pixels. But the 27-inch screen is measurably sharper because its pixels are more densely packed. The takeaway is simple. When someone tells you a screen has a high resolution, the first question should always be how big is the screen, without that second number. The resolution figure is almost meaningless for judging actual visual sharpness. Pixels per inch is the metric that actually tells you what your eyes will experience. YouTube compression versus resolution. Here's something most people never think about. When you upload a video to YouTube, YouTube destroys it, not maliciously, but thoroughly. Every single video that gets uploaded is re-encoded by YouTube servers using its own compression settings, and the result is always lower quality than your original file. Always. The reason is simple. YouTube serves billions of hours of video every day, and storing and streaming all of that at full original quality would require impossible amounts of bandwidth and storage. So YouTube compresses everything aggressively to make it manageable, and here is where the resolution lie kicks in. YouTube does not treat all resolutions equally. A 1080p video on YouTube typically gets compressed down to around 8 megabits per second. That is already quite aggressive. But when you upload a 4K video, YouTube allocates a much higher bitrate, somewhere between 35 and 45 megabits per second. That is over 4 times the data budget. This means a 4K video on YouTube does not just look better because it has more pixels. It looks better because YouTube gives it more data to work with, which preserves more detail, more color accuracy, and fewer ugly compression artifacts. This is also why many creators use a well-known trick. They upscale their 1080p footage to 4K before uploading. The video was never truly 4K, but by uploading it at that resolution, it triggers YouTube to use a higher bit rate during compression. The result is a noticeably cleaner 1080p image than if they had uploaded at native 1080p. YouTube also uses different compression codecs depending on the resolution. Lower resolution videos often get the older, less efficient codec, while 4K and above tend to receive more modern, better compression. So selecting 4K in the quality menu is not just about pixel count, it is about getting access to a fundamentally better compressed stream. Gaming resolution versus FPS. In gaming, resolution and frame rate are in a constant fistfight, and your graphics card is the referee trying to keep them both alive. Every time you increase the resolution, you're asking your graphics card to calculate and render more pixels per frame. Going from 1080p to 4K means jumping from roughly 2 million pixels to 8.3 million. That is 4 times the workload, every single frame. And when the graphics card is working 4 times harder on each frame, it produces fewer frames per second. That is your frame rate dropping. So a game that runs at a smooth 120 frames per second at 1080p might struggle to hit 60 at 4K on the same hardware. And in fast-paced games, that difference is not just visible. It is something you physically feel. Lower frame rates mean more input lag, less responsive controls, and a choppier experience. This is why competitive gamers almost universally play at 1080p or 1440p, even when they own 4K monitors. They are not confused. They are making a deliberate trade-off, sacrificing pixel count for responsiveness. A 1080p image at 240 frames per second feels dramatically better in a shooter than a 4K image at 60 frames per second. Your brain notices smoothness and responsiveness far more than it notices pixel density when things are moving fast. Marketing wants you to believe that the best gaming experience means the highest resolution possible. That is convenient because it sells expensive monitors and graphics cards. But in practice, the best experience is the one where resolution and frame rate are balanced for the type of game you are playing. A cinematic single-player game benefits from higher resolution. A competitive multiplayer game benefits from higher frame rate. Pretending one number matters more than the other is dishonest. Upscaling versus native resolution. Native resolution means your graphics card is rendering every single pixel on your display from scratch. If you have a 4K monitor, native means the game is actually calculating all 8.3 million pixels every frame. Upscaling means the game is cheating in a clever way. Instead of rendering at full 4K, the graphics card renders at a lower resolution, maybe 1080p or 1440p, and then an algorithm reconstructs that image to fill your 4K screen. The result looks close to native, sometimes surprisingly close, but it is not the same thing. The two biggest upscaling technologies right now are NVIDIA's Deep Learning Super Sampling and AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution. NVIDIA's approach uses dedicated artificial intelligence processors built into its graphics cards to predict and reconstruct missing detail between frames. AMD's approach uses temporal and spatial data processed through standard shaders, which means it works on a much wider range of hardware without needing specialized chips. Both of them render the game at a lower internal resolution, then rebuild the image to your display resolution. The performance gains are significant. You might get double the frame rate compared to native rendering, with only a subtle loss in image sharpness. At the quality preset, most people genuinely cannot tell the difference from native and normal gameplay, but push it to the performance or ultra-performance presets, and things start getting soft. Fine details smear, text gets blurry, and thin objects like fences or hair can shimmer or disappear. The marketing often implies that upscaling is identical to native. It is not. It is a reconstruction, an educated guess, and sometimes a very good one. But calling an upscaled image true 4K is like calling a photocopy the original document. It serves the purpose, but it is not the same thing. 8K marketing. 8K resolution means 7680 by 4320 pixels. That is 33 million pixels, 4 times the count of 4K and 16 times full HD. On paper, it sounds like a massive leap. In your living room, it is almost certainly a waste of money. The fundamental problem is your eyes. The human eye has a finite resolving power. At typical living room viewing distances of 8 to 10 feet, most people with normal 20/20 vision cannot distinguish individual pixels on a 4K television that is 65 inches or larger. The pixels are already too small to see. Adding 4 times more of them does not make the image look 4 times sharper. It makes it look identical because your biology hit its limit one resolution tier ago. The math backs this up. On a 75-inch television, you would need to sit closer than 5 feet to even begin noticing a difference between 4K and 8K, closer than 2.5 feet to see the full benefit. Nobody watches television from 2.5 feet away. A 2025 study published in Nature by researchers at Cambridge University confirmed this. They found that on a 44-inch display at a normal viewing distance of about 8 feet, even a 1440p resolution already exceeds what the human eye can perceive. 4K was overkill. 8K was not even in the conversation. The market has responded accordingly. Total 8K television sales since 2015 amount to only about 1.6 million units worldwide, compared to nearly a billion 4K sets in active use. LG has halted 8K panel production entirely. TCL stopped making them in 2023. Native 8K content barely exists. No major streaming service offers it. The industry spent years insisting 8K was the future. Consumers responded with a collective shrug, and they were right to. Viewing distance myth. There is a widely repeated claim that you need to sit at a specific exact distance from your screen to see a particular resolution. Charts get passed around showing precise distances in feet and inches, as if human vision works like a light switch that flips between seeing pixels and not seeing pixels. That is not how it works. The underlying science is real. Your ability to resolve fine detail depends on the angle those details take up in your visual field, and that angle changes with distance. Sit closer, and each pixel covers a larger angle, making it easier to see. Sit further away, and pixels shrink in your vision until they blend together. The problem is that these charts almost always assume perfect 20/20 vision, and vision varies wildly from person to person. Someone with 20/15 vision can detect finer detail than someone with 20/20, and someone with 20/25 sees less. Age matters too. A 25-year-old will generally perceive more detail than a 55-year-old at the same distance. The charts also ignore the fact that perceiving resolution is not just about spotting individual pixels. Even when you cannot pick out a single pixel, you can often still detect the difference between two resolutions because higher pixel density produces smoother edges, finer text, and cleaner gradients. These are cumulative effects, not binary ones. The bigger myth is using these charts to justify buying a higher resolution display without considering screen size. A 55-inch 4K television viewed from 10 feet away offers effectively no visible benefit over 1080p for most people. But sales staff will never mention that because it does not move product. The viewing distance conversation is useful, but only when it includes screen size, your personal vision quality, and what you are actually watching. Strip away any of those variables, and the numbers become meaningless. Bitrate versus resolution. This is arguably the most important and most misunderstood concept in all of digital video. Bitrate is the amount of data used to represent each second of video, usually measured in megabits per second. Resolution tells you the pixel grid. Bitrate tells you how much actual information fills those pixels. And that distinction is everything. You can have a 4K video with a low bitrate, and it will look worse than a well-encoded 1080p video with a high bitrate. The 4K version has more pixels, yes, but each pixel carries less information. The colors get muddy, gradients break into ugly bands, fast motion turns into blocky smears, and fine detail dissolves into mush. This is exactly what happens on streaming platforms. When your internet connection dips, the service does not lower the resolution immediately. It lowers the bitrate first. You are still technically watching a 4K stream, but the image looks like it was smeared with petroleum jelly because there is not enough data per second to maintain quality. A 4K stream from a major platform might deliver around 15 to 25 megabits per second. A 4K Blu-ray disc delivers up to 100 megabits per second or more. Same resolution, massively different quality. The Blu-ray is not sharper because it has more pixels. It has the exact same number. It is sharper because each pixel is described with far more precision. This is why chasing resolution numbers without asking about bitrate is a trap. A 1080p video at 50 megabits per second will look stunning. A 4K video at 10 megabits per second will look mediocre. Resolution sets the ceiling. Bitrate determines how close you actually get to it. Without sufficient bitrate, those extra pixels are just empty promises. If resolution lies kept you entertained, go watch every type of monitor refresh rate explained right now. It is on screen. Tap it.